In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, thank you for that. If there are no others, who can tell me what's special about today's date? Phil, were you going to say something? It's Valentine's Day, okay. So on Valentine's Day, we often think of, love, right? Flowers, cards, date night, that type of thing, right? So when you hear love, what are some of the things that come to mind? Anybody, just shout them out. What are some things that the word love means to you? Okay, so, maybe it is some of those things, the flowers, the cards, that mushy, gushy stuff, right? So let's look at this morning. We're going to look at a little bit different aspect of love, or a very different aspect of love. In 1 Corinthians 13, we're going to look at agape love, God's love. And one of the concerns, I think, that we face in our culture, I don't know if it's just here in our Western culture, but I know in the English language at least, love has gotten watered down. The word love has gotten watered down to the point of we don't really know totally what is love, what does it mean. The way it's written here in 1 Corinthians, this is God's love, agape love. And I'm going to try to, not while I'm reading the text, but I'm going to try to, as we refer to this as we go through here, refer to it as agape, just so we can distinguish what we're talking about this morning, maybe make more of a point. This last week when I was studying, I came across this little story of this little first grade girl who went over to a friend's house for a sleepover, and the friend's mother was chatting with her a little bit before they were ready to have dinner, and she was just talking, and in talking, she mentioned that they were going to have what they were going to have for supper. She had chicken, and she mentioned buttered broccoli, and she asked the little girl, she said, "Do you like buttered broccoli, or do you like broccoli?" And this very polite young lady, she said, "Oh, yes, ma'am, I love broccoli." And that's not unheard of, I guess. It's not very normal, maybe, for little people to love broccoli. But when it came time to sit down and pass the food, the mom noticed that this visitor, the little girl, didn't take any broccoli. And she said, "I thought you said you love broccoli, but you didn't take any." And she said, "Oh, I do love broccoli, but just not enough to eat it." And I think maybe that is kind of where we find ourselves using the term love, using the word love, kind of lightly, not really understanding or not really focusing in what it means in the sense of God's love. Do we know what it means? Well, let's look here what Paul writes here in 1 Corinthians 13. We'll start in verse 1, and we'll read through the first part of verse 8. Verse 1, "If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing." And then here, starting verse 4, we get into what is or is not love. "Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends." And for our text this morning, I think we'll stop there at that first part of verse 8. So as we look at 1 Corinthians 13, we have to kind of get the setting here. Chapter 12, Paul is talking about the body, the church body, the gifts, different gifts in the body, and people being used of God in their various gifts. And he was talking about that. End of chapter 12, he says, actually the last sentence there, he says, but I will show you still a more excellent way. And I think this is that more excellent way, is this thing of love here. So very quickly, in the first 3 verses, just looking at what all he says he can have here. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, I'm a noisy gong, and don't have love. It says I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And I don't know about you, but to me, a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal, it's just, that sounds annoying, to say the least. If we'd hear that without the accompaniment of like a full orchestra or something, if you hear those things, it's just not pleasant. It's unpleasant. That's what he's saying. People are going around, if they don't have the agape, and even if they're doing these things, it's annoying. It's a lot of noise and nothing much else going on. And he says, if I have all prophetic powers, understand all mystery, and have all knowledge, all faith, so that he could move or remove mountains, but doesn't have love, he says, I am nothing. And then he says, if I give away everything I have, if I just give everything to charity, and I even give my physical body for sacrifice, if I don't have love, I gain nothing. So we can see from these first 3 verses, he's saying very adamantly that if we expect to be effective in God's kingdom, if we're going to be effective with the gifts that he's given us, we need to demonstrate agape in our lives. We need to have agape to do that. So let's look here at verse 4. What is love? What is agape? And the first one here says patient, and we all kind of know what this means. Patient. The lexicon that I was looking up here, the original would give some kind of. It refers to remaining tranquil while waiting, staying calm while waiting, to bear up under provocation without complaint. So the key here, I think, is the part without complaint. It's not just if you're waiting, you're patient. I have been in situations. One thing I thought of was a train, and I'm sure many of you have had issues with the train out here, trying to get to church, and you're stuck on the other side, and the train is going very slow or stopped sometimes, and you don't have a choice but to wait. But you might not be waiting patiently. If you're waiting without complaint, then that's patience. So I have to confess that usually when I'm waiting, it's not without complaint. But patience, agape is patient with circumstances, during circumstances, with people, is patient without complaint. The next one there is kind. Agape is kind. And that's pretty much how we use it today. Some synonyms there are merciful, courteous, gentle, benevolent. That's pretty self-explanatory. I think we know what kind is. We use that in our language today. Now he shifts a little bit, and he talks about several things here that agape is not, or does not. He says it does not envy, and that is to have intense negative feelings over another's achievement or success. Or jealousy, the way we use the word jealousy today. The envy says, I want what he or she has for myself, for my purposes, to be for me. It could be possessions, doesn't have to be. It could be status, it could be position, it could be family, it could be education, it could be a lot of different things. If we look at someone and we have a negative feeling over their success or achievements, that's envy. He says agape doesn't have that. Agape doesn't have those feelings. Agape doesn't boast, and that would be to heap praise on oneself, being a braggart or a windbag. We don't hear that term too much in today's language. I remember hearing that when I was younger. Somebody referred to as a windbag, but again, just kind of an empty, pointless, in the sense of somebody just talking about themselves. And the next one, arrogant, kind of goes with that. To cause to have an exaggerated self-conception, puff up, make proud, conceited, and to put on airs. So those two are similar in the sense of elevating oneself and being boastful or arrogant. If envy says, I want what he or she has, boastful or arrogance says, don't you wish you'd have what I have? That's kind of the opposite side of that, but they're both something that agape does not do. The next one is rude. Also kind of fits in there. If you picture a person who's boastful and arrogant and rude, is that the type of person you want to be hanging out with? Is that the type of friend material, the person you want to be with? I definitely don't. It's not the type of people we want to be around. And that would, the definition there would be to behave disgracefully, dishonorably, or indecently, offensively, impolite, or bad-mannered is rude. And I've heard people referred to as rude. Somebody comes in and says something with zero tact and then whisks off. You might hear someone in their wake say, man, that was rude. That person is rude. And that's what that is. Just absolutely no regard for someone else and their feelings. Okay, the next one here, I wish wouldn't be in here. And this has been one of them, one of the sticking points for me, I guess, that I told you I've been struggling with this message. It says it does not insist on its own way. And it does refer back a little bit to 1 Corinthians in chapter 10, where Paul is talking to them about laying down their own desires and what they want for the good of others, where he was talking about specifically one of the issues in their time and their culture was meat offered to idols. And he was saying that, well, if it's offensive to someone, don't do it, especially in front of them. If you're at the marketplace or whatever and you do it unawares, don't worry about it. It's not a sin, but don't be careful to not be a stumbling block or a spiritual hindrance to others. In 24, he says, in verse 24 of chapter 10, it says, let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. And that's a real tough one sometimes. When I look around me and I'm like, well, yes, in theory, I prefer others more than myself. But when it comes down to actual doing life, that's a tough one. That's maybe you don't find it that way. That is the way with me, is I do kind of want it my own way. It says agape doesn't. Agape says, we can do it your way. That's okay. Let's do it your way. The next one is also, my family would probably tell you, is another one, tough one for me, is agape is not irritable. And this is defined as provoked or anger, having or showing a tendency to be easily annoyed. Have you ever had those days when you felt like you were easily annoyed? And the crazy thing is, maybe not crazy, maybe ironic, the people who we say we love the most, often, I find it, are the ones that I'm easily annoyed by sometimes. The people we're around the most. If we've been in shutdown, essentially, for days, weeks, and we're close-knit family together, a lot of togetherness, there can be times of being easily annoyed with each other. And I'm sure I'm the source of annoyance for the others in my life too at times. But so agape isn't irritable. It's not resentful. Does not count up wrongdoing. There's some scratching of the heads, I guess, with some of the translators, the different ones. But as far as I could find out, the direct translation would come out somewhere in that range of does not count up wrongdoing. That's not the way we would talk nowadays, but it essentially means from in the context here, whatever it is, doesn't keep score, doesn't keep track of what's happened in the past. Agape is willing to move on, and it kind of ties in with the whole thing of does not insist on its own way. When we are resentful, when I am resentful, and kind of keeping score, keeping track, and I think, man, I've given up my way 5 times in a row. Why doesn't that person, if they're true Christians, they should be able to give up too. And that's where the resentful side, agape doesn't do that. Agape is willing to let that go and keep letting it go. As we look back or over through these past, 5 or 6 ones here, there's something that keeps coming to the surface, is that agape is not selfish. Agape is looking out for the others around us. It's not selfish. And that's one of the challenges for me, I think, is agape, the root, when we boil some of this stuff down, that's one of the words that comes out is it's not selfish, it's selfless love. So in verse 6, it says, does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth, or in the truth, some translations say. Agape does not take pleasure in unrighteousness, but finds joy in the truth of God. And that's something I think I need to stop and think about. Doesn't take pleasure in unrighteousness, whether our own sin, our own unrighteousness, or if something happens to someone else, to be dwelling on that and gossiping about that, talking about that. Maybe, Joe brought out last week, sometimes we give prayer requests about a situation or something, to be careful of that, agape does not rejoice in those things and rejoice in the wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth or in the truth. Now, as we are kind of shifting gears here again a little bit, verse 7, there's 4 things here that again point to what agape is. And if we just read this verse, it bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. That kind of sounds a lot like what we are hearing nowadays of the movement of tolerance, and everybody love everybody everywhere and accepting and all that. But if we dig in a little bit deeper, it gives a little bit different view of that. The first one there, bears all things. Here's another one where there's some, I don't know if it's debate, but there's some head scratching as far as the initial intent or the translation. Here, a lot of translations have the word bears in here. The NIV actually interprets this as protect. Love protects. And I kind of like how they both kind of fit together. The idea of to bear up against difficulties would be during difficulties, during the hard times, bearing up, and with that, protecting those loved ones, protecting what's needed. And the protecting was kind of along the lines of keep confidential, to kind of be careful to not broadcast or to expose, I guess. So that's the bears all things. Believes all things. And this gives the idea of keeping faith in maybe someone more than believing, not necessarily believing everything somebody tells you. I have a personal experience of a young man who I've known for probably 15 years or so. I got to know him at our Bible club in Napanee. And he, some time ago, I think it was maybe a year and a half, he stopped by the roastery and he was chatting with me, I asked him how he's doing. He said, actually, he's about to be homeless. And he said he's crashing on someone's couch right now, but they're telling him if he doesn't help pay the rent, they're going to kick him out and he's going to be homeless. And he said, could you borrow me $40 so I can help pay the rent this month? And I was a little bit suspicious, but I said, well, I could borrow it to you. Are you going to pay me back? And he said, oh, yeah. He said, I've got a job now. And he said, actually, and I get paid every other week. Next Friday is my payday. He said, I'll come by, I'll stop by, and I'll pay you back. So you're the first place I'm going to stop. And so I said, okay, all right, I trust you. I gave him $40, and he took off. And I didn't see him for months. And he once in a while, I see him on the street, or he comes in the coffee shop, stops by, and I'll chat with him. And every time I've seen him since then, that's the first thing he says, I still owe you the $40. I'll get it to you. I'm going to get it to you. I don't have it right now, but I'll get it to you. And I believe in him. I believe in God's ability to change his life. I told Deborah, if he comes back and asks for more money, I'm going to tell him no. Not until you pay me back for the $40 you borrowed last time. I'm not going to give you more money. But I do believe, I don't write him off. I do believe that God can work in his life. God can change his life. And I think that's what this believing is all about, is believing in the person, believing in God's ability to change people, not write them off, not say, you had your chance, you're done. I'm not gonna help you anymore. But to believe in God's ability to work in them and change them. The next one, hopes all things. This gives the idea of looking forward to something with implication of confidence in something. It's not just a kind of hope. So it's a confidence. This hope that's used here, this word that's used here, is a future forward-looking hope and a confidence. And again, a confidence in a person and a confidence in those around us that they can change. Endures all things. And that is to maintain a belief or course of action in the face of opposition. Stand one's ground, or to hold out. And this kind of ties back into the bears all things again. This thing of just being there, lifting up, holding, helping. Even when it feels like, Jesus told Peter how many times he needs to forgive, that same kind of thing. I think agape is there over and over. It's consistent. And then verse 8, the first sentence there in verse 8, love never ends. It lasts forever. Doesn't fail. Doesn't fall or fail. It's dependable. Agape is dependable. It's always there. As we kind of look through all of these and kind of, first of all, what I said earlier, I think it's very clear from what Paul is teaching us here that we need agape to be effective. To be effective in the gifts that God has given us, to be effective Christians, to reach others, to show others. If we don't have agape to show those around us, what are we going to show them? If I just show them me, they're going to run. They don't want that. We need to be able to show them agape. So when we boil all this down, I said we had our culture, we've kind of watered down the word love. And if we picture putting, how one of my irritations is a coffee pot that's been sitting on a burner most of the day, and you evaporate a lot of water out of there, and you try to drink that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's, that's concentrated. is one way to put it. So that is what, if we concentrate, what is love? And we concentrate it down. To me, there's a couple things that stand out. There's two words that stand out, and that is selfless and sacrifice. And I think, in my mind, that is really the root. Now, that doesn't sound to me, that doesn't sound as fun and as nice as cards and flowers and date nights. And I think there's definitely room, I know there's room for that too. But as far as for godly love, for agape, I really think it comes down to selfless sacrifice. And that's where, if I'm honest, if I'm really looking inside, there's areas where God is working on me. Well, what are my motives? And if we look at, if we're looking for a perfect example, that would be Jesus. And three times on the cross, while he's hanging on the cross, in pain, in suffering, he looks out over the crowd. I think it's, yes, the version in Matthew tells us that he looks out at the crowd, the very people that had spit on him, that mocked him, that were laughing at him and cursing him, hitting him with stones and sticks. Those very people, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Jesus was concerned about the crowd, the people, the sinners, the bad people. And in Luke, it says that he had compassion on the criminal hanging next to him. And he said, "Today you will be with me in paradise." He had compassion for him there. And the account in John references how he made plans for his mother, his earthly mother. While he's hanging on the cross, he made sure she was going to be taken care of in the future. That is the perfect example of selfless sacrifice is Jesus. And I tend to look at that and think, well, that's Jesus. There's no way he's perfect. There's no way I can attain to that. And maybe so, but we need to strive for that. I need to strive to be more like him. As I was thinking about this application, or where does that leave us? What does Andy often initiate some thinking, I guess, on my part. He was asking me earlier this week, is, well, what are you trying to get across? What is the call to action? What should be the application of this? And I really think for myself this past week, one of the things I've been struggling with, looking inward and being honestly looking at my motives. What are my motives behind my actions of love? Are they self-serving? Is it for me? Or am I literally doing it for those around me? Am I doing these things as a selfless sacrifice? It doesn't mean necessarily that we analyze what I want to do and then agape is doing the opposite. That's not true either. But I think our motive is a very big part of what drives this. And that for me was the challenge for me. I want to leave that challenge with you this morning, is to analyze, what are my motives when I'm doing something. Maybe it's a good thing that I'm doing. Why am I doing it? Is it just, am I going to try to get some personal gain out of this? Or is it really because I'm doing it for the good of those around me? Or am I not doing something because I want to do it my way and not be willing to give up for those around me? Okay. With those thoughts, why don't we stand for prayer? Lord, thank you for your many blessings. Lord, I just ask you this morning that you would continue to work in my life, continue to show me the areas where I need to work on, to change, to do better, to show your agape to the people around me, to the people I come in contact with, to my family, to my friends, to my loved ones, and to our church body. Lord, just pray that you would lead and direct and that you would be with us. Just pray that you would be with us